day to be alive. Thank you for joining us on the 20th of October 2021. Yes, it is a very, very beautiful day, and that is intentional. My name is Esther Kalu on the newspaper review, and we are already joined via phone call by with our guest, Mr. Timi Olagunju, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Timi.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So this morning we have seen the papers, the Punch newspaper, the Vanguard and the Guardian newspaper all have similar headlines talking about the dates, the special October 20th dates. This is the first time that it's now going to become a memory after a long while. I'd like to ask you, as a Nigerian, what have you observed? What are the changes you've observed between October 20th, 2020 and October 20th, 2021? What are the changes you've observed?
Oh, well, the changes I've observed have been much more of that of a negative feeler on the part of the policymakers. And then there's an increased distrust between, policymakers and even the citizens, particularly young people. And you see that in the outflux of young people out of the country. And you see a leader is a dealer in hope. So when there is an atmosphere of despair and a lack of hope, in a system or trust in a system, what usually happens is that a lot of people who want to leave that system to find opportunities where there seems to be some sanity in the, in the trust system. So I see that outflux of young people out of the country, primarily because of, the way the whole NCS protest was handled by policymakers.
Okay,
and really, things have not really changed if you look at it in terms of how the police, deal. But then there's an increased awareness amongst young people, particularly Nigerians, in confronting injustice, particularly when it involves the security agencies.
Yeah, you mentioned that a lot of people, you've seen that people have made up their minds to leave because they want something better than what they've seen in the country so far. Are you referring to the brain drain? I mean, I thought we were just going to focus on the answers, but is this in connection to the brain drain, especially when it has to do with doctors? Do you think that the protest had any link to motivating them?
Beyond even doctors, more Nigerian young people are beginning to find a reason to actually flee the country because of that level of distrust that seems to have increased between the government and the governed.
Okay,
so yes.
You were talking about increased awareness.
Yes.
Yes, please. How much awareness? What is the difference between how much information people had last year, especially in terms of knowing their right to asking for a better life? Because I'm going to link it to a statement coming from the governor of Lagos State this morning. How much awareness have you observed so far?
Well, observation is relative. So I would just say what I think I've observed. I think, we may not have statistics to show it, but in my day-to-day dealings, and navigating the spaces of Nigeria, I've discovered that, and then being a member of the Human Rights Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association, Lagos State chapter, right? I've seen an increased awareness and engagement of citizens with injustice perceived from the police. So the NSAS protest had a way of demystifying the security agencies and making the people understand that they are humans as against the perception that we have coming from military regime. So I see increased engagement of people in terms of questioning security agencies, when certain measures of injustice are perpetuated, on the streets of Nigeria. So that's what I've observed.
All right. There's been a lot of statements from the police in the past few days. Today is Wednesday, and since Monday, we've been getting comments from the Commissioner of Police, especially in Lagos State. And just yesterday, we had #answers on the Vanguard newspaper. Stay away from streets. Protest indoors virtually. Lagos CP made that statement. What does protest indoors actually mean, if you are to interpret that?
Well, he made that, the Commissioner of Police made that statement to protest indoors. Whether he must also remember that he is also a product of the legal system, right? and is the commissioner of police because the laws and the constitution allows him to have that capacity or right. And so in that same sense, the same law that gives him that right to be commissioner of police or to even have a police system in a state is the same law that gives people the right of freedom of assembly. And the High Court, in a particular judgment, interestingly, in a judgment between AMPP brought in by President Muhammad Buhari before he became president against the PDP, right, against the presidency at that time and the IGP of police. In that same judgment, it was said that Nigerians do not need police permit to be able to assemble peacefully, including a protest. And so President Buhari himself has been a beneficiary of a court judgment before he was president that laid the landmark that, Nigerian citizens can protest, can gather peacefully and, within the confines of the law. Okay. And so the commissioner of police statement can only be put on advisory. It is not a legal position of the law in any way.
Thanks for mentioning confines of the law, because I was going to ask that are there limits to this right, the right of the freedom of assembly? Are there limits to this particular right? Because even the citizens, the youth and whoever wants to go out to protest, I mean, whether virtually or outdoors, should be aware of this right. So are there limits to this particular right?
No, the limits that exist do not involve, getting any permission from any police officer. If you and I want to assemble with our family members and friends, we have a right to do that. But then it must not obstruct, the peace of others. For example, violence, right? Okay. So there are laws to cope with that when unprovoked, violence is meted. In some sense. So the freedom of assembly is as free as the ability to gather, within the confines of any particular environment, And so the point really is that the commissioner of police is just giving an advisory statement, within the context of the law, which also puts him in power, So it's not in any way legal. People can assemble.
Okay, looking at the outcome of what happened last year and what started the NSAS protest in the first place. I know I asked you about what has changed and you gave your points. Now let's talk about compensations. There have been panels across Nigeria, I know, for Lagos State, and even yesterday Lagos State talked about how much they've been able to give out, to dole out to those that have made their petitions known, So let's talk about compensations, and let's talk about how the law has taken effect from last year to this year. Do you think that enough has been done in compensating those who were directly affected?
Well, evidence is the end of argument. The evidence before us does not seem to show that there has been any compensation. But, you must commend the panel. The panel is working tirelessly to ensure that a certain report is made. But the panel has no power to enforce it. Just like the Okuta panel or, whatever panel that have submitted reports in this country to the executive. It is within the ambit of the executive to actually implement, this report to ensure that justice is not just done, but evidently and clearly seen to be done. That has not happened, So then that is a call to the, government across levels to do what is needful to implement this, report and ensure that justice is not just done, but evidently seen to be done. Or else, what you have is you have a litany of injustice. And you see injustices have a way of breeding resentment and then eventually violence.
All right. We have just a short time to be able to conclude on this conversation. I'd like to say that we got reports in the news recently as well about those that are still in Kirikiri from last year's, just because of this protest last year. And because we talked about the panel, we're talking about those that are not in prison. Now, how about those in prison? Do you see much work being done for those that are still waiting for maybe for an answer or for a ruling.
Protest in prison?
Yes.
Oh, I'm a member of the NBA Human Rights Committee, and to a large extent, that was a key part of the legal team that helped, get people out of prison during the protest.
Okay.
So I've not particularly heard that protest.
This was just in the news. I mean, about 2 days ago, I mean, it was on the Punch newspaper, about 300 inmates or so, and they're still in Kirikiri. This was in the news recently. So I just wanted to ask if you think that a lot has been done to be able to even find out what's happening to those that are still in prison.
I need to confirm that report properly, you know, before I can make any tangible comment on that particular report, you know, in that context.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Now, let me give you one last question. So as for today, a lot of Nigerians are asking that whatever happens, no life should be lost today, and that only those who probably don't have things to do would be willing to embark on this protest. How do you see that statement?
Well, I think that whoever made that statement, I'm sure it will not come from well-meaning, you know, Nigerians who see what is on ground. But whoever made that statement has the right to their freedom of expression, right?
Yeah.
But then the point about the EndSARS protest or the remembrance, basically, is to ensure that if there are people, like you mentioned, who are still in Kirikiri as a result of the protest and nothing else but the protest, that their release is secure. The EndSARS protest is to ensure that, you know, the police begins to understand that it has to be a friend of the people rather than act like it's in the military regime. I know that we've come from a litany, history of military regime, but we cannot continue from where we came from. You know, when you repeat history, you are doomed. When you ignore history, you are doomed to repeat things. Right? And so the EndSARS protest is saying that, look, the welfare of the security officers, including the police, must be well catered for. Situations where they live in huts and hamlets, not befitting for the kind of work they do for the people, is not commendable, and that their welfare needs to be taken care of in the context of the principle of salus populi et suprema lex. That is, the welfare of the people being the supreme law of the land. So these are core issues that the EndSARS protest is bringing to fore, and that the October issue, that there needs to be a look into that issue, and that whatever report comes from it is dealt with so that justice is done. So those clamoring for, you know, this remembrance are doing that in order to ensure that Nigeria is on the right path and that government focuses on the major rather than on the minor, in order to become a major in its major rather than a major in its minor.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Timi Olagunju. Just to make a quick correction, I found the report on the Guardian newspaper, but I'll probably have to share that with you much later. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, do have a great day ahead.
And you too. And you too.
It is the newspaper review this morning, and if you are just joining us, we've had a conversation on phone with our guest, and we've seen the reports still talking about the EndSARS protest. Now in the studio, I have with me, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Mr. Obina Okafor. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about today's date. I mean, what happened last year, this time last year, not this time, but at night last year, we had the alleged shooting of protesters at Lekki toll gates. And in the news also this morning, woke up to hear that traditional rulers were killed while they were having a meeting in Imo State. And let's look at how, if we have more time, how people now respond to officials on the road, because last man made a statement this morning. So we'll start with the EndSARS protest. I'd like to ask that with all the comments coming on from the Commissioner of Police that people should protest indoors, and, you know, with people at the toll gate saying, activists at the toll gate saying that they insist on protesting, how do you see that there can be peace achieved at the end of the day and people's voices heard at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, the NSAS issue is something very, very dicey and very delicate because of of what caused it and how it eventually ended.
Okay.
Now, for today, everybody has the right to protest. It's a constitutional right to everyone, and I think that the Commissioner of Police wouldn't have been right to threaten, or whoever other the IG of Police threatening that people should not. I should have thought that should have been an appeal because it's a constitutional right to the people. Nobody has the authority or power to stop them from protesting. But what they would have emphasized more is that the capacity of the police to be able to provide the necessary protections are not, because they're overstretched now. And people should be able to look at it from that angle to ensure that, yes, in the course of trying to do an anniversary of remembering what happened last time, we should not lose any other person again. So there could be other ways of protecting. In fact, the media hype so far should be enough protest. So whether or not people go to the road or not is already remember. But what I want to now remind the government is that all those issues that led to the NSAS in the first place, how far, how much have they been addressed? Because the same brutalities that people complained about is still happening. What I thought would have happened is that, apart from changing the name from SARS to whatever name it was called, the kind of orientation that an average policeman should have, that should have been a drastic change in approach and attitude of a policeman when you see them on the road now. But those things that were happening are still happening. Everybody is being suspected on the road. Everybody is being harassed and all of that. So I think those are the issues that should be done. If those things were done, probably the hype about today would not have been as high as it is right now.
Okay.
And again, those things also that those people who lost so many things, people should just be able to have a delicate balancing between going out there and then carrying out an anniversary of it, so I don't have to lose anybody. Because the person that's supposed to protect you is saying they cannot, because that's basically what they say. That's what it implies. They have not said we cannot provide security for you, but they were saying that to be hijacked by hoodlums. Me is throwing up your hand, because you are supposed to arrest the hoodlums. Even if there are opposing protesters, you provide protection for both ends. Yeah, that's what it should be. But they are saying that we can't protect you, so you shouldn't go and risk your life. It's a fundamental right, but people should not just be careful about it. That's what I think it should be.
Okay, I really wish that Nigerians are able to get that advice. But let's also connect it to resistance from Nigerians to officials. Now, you mentioned what started the #NSAS protest in the first place, and that came from a point of resistance. And now we have back in the news this morning, Lasma Hunt's driver who stripped naked and dragged official. And I mean, just a quick read here said, the Lagos State Traffic Management Authority have threatened to prosecute bus drivers and motorists who attack men of the agency in line of duty. Lagosians know the name Lasma. And I mean, this is a traffic management authority, and they are expected to do their work. But just yesterday, there was an incident where, just on Friday, rather, not yesterday, there was an incident on Friday at Jakonde First Gate or at Lekki Ekpe Expressway. A bus driver was caught dropping off and picking passengers on the road in contravention of the Transport Sector Reform Law 2018 as amended. Now, the driver was asked to leave the spot, but was defiant and refused the entreaties of the officer deployed to correct him. If you drive in Lagos, you know these things. And so looking at a driver resisting a LASMA official, not to say that we've not had LASMA officials in the news, we've had them in the news, but now it is a driver dropping a passenger on the wrong spot, and there's the back and forth. So do you see Nigerians less confrontational with men in authority?
Well, to start with, it's very, very condemnable for any body to assault or confront violently any uniform personnel who is supposed to be serving the public. They are there in the sun providing guide or something that, so it's very, very wrong for anybody to do that. But the fact remains that we have to look at what led to some of those things now. How has LASMA themselves behaved in their approach to doing the traffic issues? Now, most of these commercial bus drivers became so emboldened because they have been allowed. They are allowed. I don't know. People are accused last month of collecting money from them or whatever. You can see a commercial bus driver parked in a particular place, and they will look the other way around. But if you see a private vehicle that parked the same spot, they will arrest the private vehicle. So that must have given some of this. I'm not supporting their behavior, but I'm saying that it takes two to tango. Sometimes you realize that maybe that person must have also felt he has one big person among them who would always talk and protect them. But it's a very wrong attitude. The law should have no preference. The place that commercial buses are parking, nobody if there's a place that's designated that nobody should park there, as long as it is clearly marked, nobody should park there. Nobody should do that.
Okay, because of our time, we have less than 2 minutes to wrap it up. The gunmen killed 3 Imo. Let's move to the east, where gunmen killed 3 Imo traditional rulers. That's a major story in the news, and it is sad that we have that going on. And I'd like to go to just read the article. Tragedy struck in Imo State yesterday. As yet to be identified gunmen opened fire on traditional rulers during a meeting, killing 3 of them. This is on the Guardian newspaper, and looking at this particular story this morning, it made the traditional rulers make a statement. Aside the fact that they were not happy that this kind of thing happened, they are still calling for peace. They made a statement, and in a statement signed, still on the Guardian newspaper, in a statement signed by the traditional rulers across the 5 states of the Southeast geopolitical zone, the monarchs asked all stakeholders in the entire section to sheath their swords and rally together for mutual forgiveness. They urged President Buhari to show wisdom and further by causing the indigenous people of Biafra to be deproscribed as a terrorist organization and Nnamdi Kanu to be released from the detention into the hands of the Igbo traditional and religious leaders. With all these statements, I mean, in 1 minute, how do you see this particular news?
Well, it's very unfortunate what is happening in the Southeast at this time. Because of our time, I wouldn't want to go too much, but I will say that, well, I believe the traditional rulers are the real traditional custodian of the rules, regulation, authorities in the environment, and they are feeling the pinch. And I think that in solving the problem, it should be a holistic approach to doing so. It may not only be the legal way the federal government is going about it. I will ask the federal government to give them the benefit of doubt, whatever be the condition that could be, because I believe strongly, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing that it's IPOB members that are doing what is happening, but it has some link, one way or the other, of it's likely that some criminals must have taken advantage of the situation and start carrying out some mayhem, political thuggery and all of that. But maybe trying to solve the problem may start from what they have just recommended, you know. So I would advise the federal government to also look at it, even if it's not exactly the way they say it, but trying to address the Nnamdi Kanu and IPOB issue will go a long way to dousing the tension that is rising in the Southeast. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Obinna Okafor. Thank you for joining us on the Newspaper Review.
Thank you.
I really wish we had more time to have this conversation. Thank you also for joining us on the Newspaper Review this morning. If you are just joining us, you are already maybe a bit late, but you can get the updates on news around the globe at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. Till I see you again, my name is Esther Kalu. Bye-bye.